June 1944. Europe burns, but hope lands on the beaches of Normandy. The Allied armies push inland, faster than anyone planned. But tanks cannot run on courage alone. They need fuel, thousands of gallons every hour. German generals watch from their bunkers. They laugh at the chaos of Allied supply lines. They believe the Americans will choke on their own success. Without fuel, even victory can stall. Eisenhower studies the maps. Patton's spearhead is deep in France, but his tanks are dying of thirst. Every day, soldiers wait beside empty fuel drums. The roads are mud, bridges are broken, trains destroyed. The front moves forward, but the gasoline stays behind. The Germans whisper, "Let them run out." They remember Napoleon's failure in Russia. Armies collapse when the wagons stop. They think logistics is America's weakness. They don't yet know it will become her greatest strength. At Allied headquarters, tension fills the room. Numbers rise on chalkboards. Miles, barrels, trucks, casualties. No one laughs here. Every officer knows, without supply the war stops. The quartermasters work in silence. Fuel convoys creep forward at night, slow, exposed. The Luftwaffe prowls above, searching for the glow of headlights. Drivers sleep in their seats, hands black with grease. They are nameless, faceless, but the war now depends on them. Eisenhower sends a message to his commanders. Find a way. Keep them moving. It's not an order, it's a prayer. Somewhere near Cherbourg, a colonel sketches a line on a map. One road in, one road out, nothing fancy. Just trucks, running day and night, never stopping. He circles it with a red pencil. A simple idea that will change the war. German generals sip their wine, unaware of what's coming. They see empty tanks, stalled convoys, exhausted men. They laugh again, confident the offensive will crumble. But in the distance, a low rumble begins. Engines, hundreds of them. The Americans call it the Red Ball Express, a name borrowed from fast freight trains back home. Soon, it will mean one thing in Europe. Fuel, food, hope, delivered through fire. The laughter in German headquarters fades into the wind, because the road that begins here will not stop until Berlin. It began with an impossible order. Move the supplies, keep the front alive. There were no new roads, no trains, no miracles. Only men, trucks, and determination. Major General John C.H. Lee stood before a map. He saw one lifeline, a single route from Cherbourg to Chartres. If it could be cleared, guarded, and kept flowing 24 hours a day, maybe the armies wouldn't stop. He gathered every truck in Europe, 6,000 vehicles, GMC, Studebaker, and Dodges. The tires were worn, the engines tired. But there was no time to wait for replacements. He called for drivers, thousands of them. Most were African-American soldiers trained to load and carry, not to fight. They stepped forward without hesitation. They would become the veins of an army. One soldier wrote, "We carried the war on our backs." They were cooks, mechanics, clerks, now turned drivers. No medals promised, no headlines waiting, only endless miles of dust and danger. Military police closed the route to all other traffic. Red circles were painted on signposts and trucks. From that day, only Red Ball convoys could pass. One way east by day, one way west by night. The code was simple: drive, deliver, return. No stops, no shortcuts, no excuses. Every hour mattered. Every gallon counted. A single breakdown could stall an entire division. Cherbourg's docks became the beating heart of the operation. Supplies rolled in from the ships, fuel drums, food, ammunition. The docks roared day and night under floodlights. Every crate, every barrel, destined for the front. Convoys formed like clockwork, each truck numbered, timed, and loaded. The men joked, "You eat breakfast in Cherbourg, lunch in Chartres, dinner in Paris, if you survive." They weren't exaggerating. The Red Ball Express wasn't glamorous. It was dangerous, dirty, and relentless. Rain turned roads into rivers. Dust choked engines and lungs alike. Still, the trucks rolled on. Drivers used road signs made of ration tins. They navigated by instinct, stars, and sheer will. Every man behind the wheel knew, if they failed, Patton's tanks would die in place. By September 1944, The convoys stretched for miles. Trucks thundered across France like a heartbeat. The Red Ball Express had become more than a name. It was a living organism, a river of steel, rubber, and courage. German scouts watched from the hedgerows. They couldn't believe what they saw. An army moving on gasoline alone. The same officers who laughed now frowned. Something powerful was coming through the smoke. Behind every victory, behind every tank that rolled forward, there was a driver gripping the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead, and the red circle on his truck meant one thing. The Allies were coming, and nothing would stop them. The engines never stopped. Day and night, the Red Ball Express thundered forward. 200 miles of dust, mud, and danger. The lifeline of the Allied armies. Convoys left Cherbourg every hour. Each one spaced 60 meters apart. Headlights dimmed, blackout orders enforced. At night, the only light came from the moon and the faint glow of the dashboard. Men drove half asleep, trusting the red taillight ahead to guide them. The rule was simple: never stop. If a truck broke down, pull it off the road. If it caught fire, jump out and keep the line moving. The convoy had to live, even if a truck had to die. Some called it madness. Others called it duty. To the men behind the wheel, it was survival. The war didn't pause for exhaustion. They faced everything: rain, fog, sniper fire, and Luftwaffe strafing. One driver wrote, "We didn't fear the enemy. We feared sleep." Fatigue became the most dangerous weapon on the road. Some men drove 40 hours straight. Cigarettes and black coffee kept them awake. Music from the radio, laughter from the back seat, a photo of home on the dashboard. Small reminders that they were still human. But the road demanded everything. When engines overheated, they poured water from canteens. When tires blew, they changed them in the dark. When bridges collapsed, engineers rebuilt them overnight. Nothing, not even the weather, was allowed to win. In towns and villages, locals waved as the convoys roared past. Children pointed at the endless line of trucks, painted with a red circle. To them, it looked like hope itself. To the soldiers, it was another mile closer to exhaustion. Every man knew his role. The loaders, mechanics, and guards moved like a machine. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They just kept driving. One road, one mission, one heartbeat. By the third week, the Red Ball Express was moving 12,000 tons of supplies every day. Fuel, food, ammunition, even mail from home. The front no longer starved, it devoured, and the drivers kept feeding it without question. Some trucks never came back. Some vanished in smoke, ambush, or fire. Their names didn't make the newspapers, but every victory up front carried their fingerprints. In the glow of dawn, engines rumbled again. Another convoy formed. Another day, another mission. No fanfare, no applause, just duty, because the road had no end and the war had no mercy for those who stopped. September 1944. General George S. Patton stood at the edge of Metz. His tanks were ready, his men eager, but every engine was thirsty. The Red Ball Express became his lifeline. Fuel drums rolled out of Cherbourg like waves. Each one carried the power to keep an army moving. Without it, Patton's Third Army would grind to a halt. Convoys raced against time. Trucks climbed hills, crossed bridges still scarred by bombs. Every mile closer to the front meant greater danger. The Luftwaffe hunted the roads by day. Drivers painted their trucks with mud to hide the shine. They traveled under clouds, hoping the smoke would protect them. Sometimes a plane dove out of the sky, gunfire ripping the air. The drivers didn't stop. One soldier shouted, "If you see tracers, keep your foot on the gas." And they did. They drove through fire, through fear, through everything the enemy could throw. The cargo had to reach Patton. At the depots near Reims, officers counted every drum. One missing truck meant one silent tank. One delay meant one lost attack. The pressure was endless. The road to Metz became a river of steel. Truck after truck, hour after hour, engines screamed, tires burned, men clenched the wheel with white knuckles. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. At night, they refueled tanks under flickering lanterns. Gasoline spilled on boots, smoke mixed with rain. Patton's men cheered as their tanks roared back to life. They saluted the drivers who made it through. Patton himself watched the convoys arrive. He knew what it meant. The war kept moving because of them. He said, "My men can fight, but the Red Ball Express delivers victory." Those words spread like fire through the ranks. Each drum unloaded was a small miracle. Each returning truck carried scars, bullet holes, dents, burned paint. But they also carried pride. No driver wanted to be the one who quit. The Germans could destroy bridges and bomb roads, but they couldn't stop momentum. Behind every tank that thundered forward, a driver had already paved the way. He just did it with a truck instead of a gun. By late September, the Red Ball Express had delivered more than 89 million gallons of fuel, enough to keep the Allied armies pushing toward Germany, enough to make the impossible march continue. Patton advanced. The enemy retreated, and the Red Ball Express rolled on, unseen, uncelebrated, unstoppable. They called themselves Brothers of the Road, not by rank, not by colour, but by survival. Every mile they drove was a promise kept, to each other, to the men up front. Most of them were African-American soldiers, men who had been told they'd never see combat, men given the hardest jobs and the smallest recognition. But on the Red Ball Express they proved everyone wrong. One driver said, "We were fighting our own war, against distance, exhaustion and doubt." Another wrote home, "If we stop, the tanks stop." It was pride, not orders, that kept them going. They shared everything: cigarettes, rations, laughter. They fixed each other's trucks when engines failed. They guarded each other at night, sleeping beside their vehicles in the cold. No medals, no promises, just trust. Sometimes they wrote letters on scraps of paper, by lantern light, hands trembling from the cold. They told their families they were fine. They didn't mention the gunfire in the distance. A slogan appeared on truck bumpers: "Keep 'em rolling," painted by hand, sometimes crooked, always proud. It became the heartbeat of the Red Ball Express, a reminder that motion itself was victory. In the rare quiet moments, they shared jokes, stories about home, about the lives they'd left behind. Some dreamed of opening gas stations after the war. Some just wanted to go home in one piece. The road tested them in every way. Rain flooded their camps. Engines froze in the morning. But when the whistle blew, they climbed back in. Duty didn't wait for rest. Officers often underestimated them. Yet when the supply numbers came in, everyone noticed. The convoys never failed. Black drivers delivered what no one else could. They earned respect not through words, but through miles. The Red Ball Express wasn't about glory. It was about grit, the kind you can't measure in medals. They carried not just supplies, but faith. Faith that their effort mattered, even if no one ever said thank you. In every photograph you can see it. A smile behind the wheel, a cigarette in hand, eyes tired but steady. That quiet look of someone who knows the road won't end soon. And still, he drives. They weren't fighting for fame. They were fighting to prove they belonged. And long before history remembered them, they already knew. They were part of something bigger than war. 82 days. That's how long the Red Ball Express roared across France. Day and night, without pause, without rest. 6,000 trucks, 412 truck companies. Nearly 75% of them driven by black soldiers. They carried fuel, food, ammunition, and hope. They crossed bridges still smoking from battle. They drove through mud, rain, and fire, and when the front moved forward, they followed. By the time the Red Ball shut down, it had delivered more than 489,000 tons of supplies, enough to keep the entire Allied army alive, enough to win a war that could have stalled in silence. But there were no parades for them, no medals pinned on dusty uniforms, no headlines or speeches. The Red Ball Express simply faded into history's rearview mirror, yet their legacy remained. Every modern military convoy, every logistical system built after the war, all of it traces back to those roads. The men who drove through the dark taught the world how to move an army. Years later, some of them returned to France. They stood on those same highways, now paved and quiet. They smiled, remembering the sound of engines, the smell of fuel, the laughter in the night. The road that once shook with thunder was still. For the German generals, it had been unthinkable. For the drivers, it was just another day's work. They never called themselves heroes. But history eventually did. Monuments now stand along the old Red Bull route. Bronze statues of men with helmets and steering wheels. Simple plaques with names few people remember. Yet every name was part of the same heartbeat. Keep 'em rolling. In museums, faded photos show the faces of the men who kept the world moving. Their expressions calm, their uniforms dusty, their eyes full of quiet pride. You can almost hear the engines again. The hum of duty, the rhythm of faith. The Red Bull Express didn't just deliver fuel. It delivered proof that courage doesn't always hold a rifle. Sometimes it holds a steering wheel and drives through the night. When history tells the story of victory, it often forgets the men who carried it on their backs. But for those who remember, the road still echoes with the sound of engines that never stopped. And somewhere, beneath the dust of forgotten miles, the Red Bull still rolls.